Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle, Book 11, Dreadgod, Chapters 11 and 12. In these chapters, we find out that Charity actually doesn't know the big bad secret, and Lindon breaks his oath by accident. Also, I am beginning to suspect that Orthos has been fed a lot of lies and propaganda as a young turtle. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. What's up, y'all? I have got a pop-in chat tonight, and people are pretty excited for me to talk about these chapters. Mhan00 says the reveal that Charity is an innocent baby was beautiful. Yeah, I did not see this coming at all. And here's why. I even mentioned this in the Discord, the Cradle No Spoilers. I posted in there about how in my re-listen, Lindon has a little chat with Charity about why she hasn't decided to ascend again, and the fact that, like, if Fury ascends, he would have to leave. And she says something about how it's an issue of balance, and that there are, like, elements in play, and she's really vague about it. And I was assuming the vagueness came from her being unable to actually, like, share this information because she was bound. And it turns out she just had a much more political concept of what this all meant. She had no idea that the actual mechanics of the monarchs staying here was what causes the dreadgods to remain. So I had mentioned, I think in the last episode, about the concept of Lindon's oath functioning according to his intention, and how sort of fascinating I found that idea, because it makes it so that you can't find a way around it. And it turns out that's not entirely true. It is true in that he didn't find a way around it. He didn't mean to do this. But there was still a way around it. It just turns out that you have to genuinely believe the person you're speaking to already knows. And the way that Charity interacts with Lindon in that scene, and that sort of superiority that she has, she's certainly... what she's doing is that thing that if you're in charge, you tend to try to do, which is give the impression that you're already in possession of all the information. So even though he says a few things that I have to assume were making her wonder what he meant, she plays it throughout as if she already knows, which just fuels him thinking she does. Because that's part of the deal with Charity, is that she keeps herself really impassive and doesn't like to show her hand about how she thinks or feels about anything. And it just didn't really, like, work out this time, at least for Lindon. It worked out for Charity in that she got this information. But the thing that's sort of interesting to me is that what she is experiencing here, I think, is going to be sort of mirrored by Orthos, in that both of them thought they knew some things about their own, like, ancestors and family history. And they are both going to find out that shit was not actually accurate, and that they have been played a little bit. Also, the fact that, let's see, Mhan says, She didn't say it, but I'm convinced half the reason she wanted to leave Cradle was because of how embarrassing the memory of her lecturing Lindon is, now that Lindon is the one who informed her of the truth. Did she want to leave Cradle? It didn't, like, I guess there's a moment of her kind of being like, maybe I should just fucking bail. It didn't feel like a real sincere desire so much as like an impulse. But I could see that. I mean, the thing here is that I find sort of like what is going on, obviously, is the fact that Malice didn't tell Lindon who knows and who didn't know. And there is no reason to assume that she wouldn't tell him if it was really important to her to keep it from Charity. So my question is, does Malice want to tell Charity and she's just not able to because of her own restrictions? And so she decides to use Lindon to inform Charity? Or was it a little bit more fucked up, which is what I am thinking? When we hear from Charity after the whole incident, and she's talking to Mercy about the potential side effects of what happened to Lindon, she is expecting the problems that he experiences to be really intense and possibly the kind of thing that could hinder his advancement in the future. And what I'm thinking is that Charity doesn't enjoy the concept of Lindon having any kind of power over her, either now or in the future, and that she was hoping he would injure himself. And that way, that's one down, really. And he wouldn't necessarily be completely out, but he wouldn't pose the kind of threat that he does when he is complete and healthy. And she just failed to fully appreciate the level to which Lindon has... how resilient he is, both mentally and with the blood-forged iron body, which is fucking practically indestructible. I have to assume this was Malice's attempt to bring him down a notch or two if she could. Maybe it was both. ¿Por qué no los dos? You know? But I just, M. Hunt says, anyone else get the idea that Lindon's soul might have let him slide before Dross pointed it out that Lindon should have been clever enough to figure out Charity didn't know? That's an interesting thing, because I was sort of, when I listened to this section twice, and I was thinking the same thing, that Dross makes sure he doesn't miss it. And I think it probably would have counted anyway, because I have to assume that Dross makes sure he sees Charity's eyes like open in surprise, but I am assuming that the next thing Charity says is going to fully expose that she didn't know. So whether Dross really pointed it out, it still would have happened anyway. That said, Dross clearly has a sort of morbid curiosity in him at this point that's like a little bit out of hand. And so a lot of what he's doing here is genuinely just, I want to see what happens though. Which a part of me kind of enjoys, I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't like Lindon being put on the line theoretically, but in practice, I'm not that worried that something irreparable is going to happen, because I know that nobody seems to really get how fucking strong he is. And so I also was sort of just curious, what does it look like if he breaks it? Like, how does that even go? And let's see, Jake says, I think it's more fucked up because she knows how much of a conflict it became between her and Fury. She wanted to keep Charity in the dark, but Lindon was also a trap. See, I just don't feel like she wanted to keep Charity in the dark. I don't know. Like, sure, there's a conflict between her and Fury, but I'm not convinced that was because he wanted Charity to know so much as just he wanted her to ascend and like do the right thing. But let's see. Jan says, no, Charity did not qualify. She never wanted to advance, and sages do not accidentally advance to monarch. They have to make the choice. Sure. Yeah, I don't think that was a question, unless I missed it. The chat is moving kind of quickly. So all right, I'm going to start here and we're going to back up because there's also another question I have. Mercy leaves. She's on her mission to go get her book and like do her robbing. And Lindon and Dross like wait until she's far enough away. And he has a moment thinking about whether Suriel can hear him as he asks for help. He's sort of praying. And then he's like, I wonder if Ethan can hear me. And he can't decide really how he feels about that. And then he just says, reveal. And Charity is standing there. And he asks her if she'll overlook this. And she says, inciting a member of our head family to steal one of our core secrets is a grave offense. Now, here's my question. He had the silence on so that nobody could hear them, or else he would be alerted to the fact that they were there. And yet she knows what his plan is. So, and later, Malice does also. She 100% is just like, oh yeah, and we're not letting him get Mercy to do that, by the way, because it'll like hurt her and it'll fuck her path up. So Malice also knows. And yet, when we were in Charity's POV, it seemed pretty clear that she couldn't tell what was happening. So my question is whether or not he let her hear because he was misleading her on something. It doesn't seem like if he was letting her get misled, it was that far off from what his actual plan is, because the way that she's talking to him, it seems like she's addressing what he was like tossing around with Mercy. So I don't know if like it was just so obvious because Mercy went straight to the library. But I mean, even if she did, it could be just for like, I don't know. There's just a lot about all of this that I felt like I wasn't really following whether or not I was supposed to understand that she fully knew that he wanted her to know or was allowing her to know or what. And he behaves in this moment in such a way that like when he's unsurprised, she's standing there watching and like he knows that she's there, he says. And the fact that he doesn't seem at all concerned that she overheard the plan after he went to the trouble of creating the barrier for them not to hear is really also kind of confusing to me. Why bother if you're going to allow her to listen in anyway? I don't understand the precaution to begin with if it's not going to matter and you're aware it's not going to matter and she isn't like, I don't know. Let's see. M. Hunt says his zone of exclusion only lets him know when someone is listening. In my humble opinion, he felt Charity watching and kept talking anyway. Rob says, I don't know if it's clear. M. Shard says, I think they guessed what Lindon would be looking for after seeing Mercy go to get the book plans. And that's the thing that I find kind of weird is like, Lindon has to know. Mercy leaves this conversation and goes straight to the library to get her shit, that they're going to put two and two together. And Lindon is not like that fucking dense. That is a man with a plan most of the time. And he is really prepared usually and has like a lot of different methods. You know, we saw him with all the plans, backups that he was like showing to Mercy based on where the books were. It just, none of this really adds up. So I can't decide if it doesn't add up because I am asking too many questions, or if it doesn't add up because it's not what it looks like. But when we're in Mercy's POV, it seems like it's what it looks like. I don't know. I have to assume that he's sort of like setting them up to think one thing is happening when that's not really it. But I'm just going to hope that's what it is. You know, I've said at the beginning of covering this that it looks sort of like it might be a heist story, and a heist has a lot of like red herrings and sort of misdirects. So I'm just going to sort of hang my hat on that this is a bit of a misdirect, and we'll see. Rob says, here's the third level of inception. Maybe Lindon knew they would know and wanted them to stop her from advancing easily, which puts her in opposition to the family. Or it's a plot hole. Oh, well. He knew they knew that he knew they knew. I shared this on my my personal Facebook, but I am a member on Facebook of this group called People Against Modern Farmhouse, which, for those who are not aware, modern farmhouse is a decorating style that is extremely tired and tacky and just overdone and really like performative in a way that's baffling to me. And the people in that group are very leftist, and some folks who had joined did not realize that. And so there was a post like kind of shitting on the thin blue line display at a Hobby Lobby, which resulted in this schism, and a bunch of people left the group, which the group originally is the People Against Modern Farmhouse. The folks who left created a group called the People Against Modern Farmhouse. And the most leftists created a group called the People Against Modern Farmhouse. And I think that since then there has been like 2 additions to that level. And honestly, it is really funny. It is quite amusing to me. I love like stupid petty shit like that has no effect on anything. Now there's also one called the gay guy against the People Against Modern Farmhouse. And so there's like offshoots as well. So Rob says, I wonder if Natasha's read the Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. I have not. I haven't even heard that. Devin says, this can't be real. It is. If you're talking about the Facebook groups, you can go check. Type in the People Against Modern and see what comes up, because I think you'll see quite a list. But anyway, okay, sorry. I just got a little bit caught up in the he knew that they knew that they knew he knew. So, yeah. She's trying to convince him like that rushing her advancement is going to result in instability and damage. And I just can't help but think he knows something that's going to keep that from being an issue, because Lindon does not want instability for Mercy. She's on his team, as he has put it. If anybody's going to really care about that, it will be him. So they've underestimated him before. I'm just going to assume they're doing it again. And I love this moment where Dross says she knows. Use the traps. Beneath Charity's feet lay a host of concealed scripts and constructs, all placed by Lindon days ago, just in case. They were part of Lindon's backup plan, but as that plan involved fighting Charity and escaping, he didn't want to use it. And I just like, as Dross, I'm just also, well, maybe just see what happens, Lindon. Just use them just to see, you know? And at this point, I've kept my oath. I haven't told her anything. But we're dealing with a fucking Dreadgod, and keeping her at Overlord is not an advantage. The book has what she needs. She could advance quickly and acclimate. And Charity is basically like, yeah, I said it's possible, but it's not going to be helpful to her, and she's not in danger. I think you're really overestimating what the deal is with these Dreadgods. We have weathered this kind of shit before, and we will do it again. You are behaving as if this is a threat we have never faced. And he says, all of a sudden, then you tell her. He realized he'd shouted and moderated his tone. Apologies, but I don't like keeping this secret. If she knew the situation, she could make her own decision. If her mother thought Mercy needed to know, she would have told her, or I would have. Mercy would want Malice to ascend rather than endangering others. When Charity didn't react, he pushed harder. Apologies, but you have to know it's true. Mercy would never allow the Dreadgods to keep killing people when it's possible to remove them. And her eyes widen, and Lindon goes down. And he's thinking, I thought for sure she knew. And Dross is like, ooh, but that is not what she said. She said she tells sages and heralds that have a good chance of advancement or that get close to the truth on their own. And this moment, would he die? Maybe not, Dross said, and he was calmer now. There's no telling. We head forth into the unknown together. Lindon had many regrets. He regretted that he was dragging Dross down with him for his own stupid mistake. Y'all, can we just take a moment? Can we just reflect on the purity of Lindon? Dross is over here gleeful and delighted to see what fucking happens to Lindon. And Lindon is like, I'm so sorry, Dross. Despite knowing that Dross is out here going, ooh, let's see. He is still like apologetic. I mean, I could never. Lindon is just such a better person than me. He regretted that he hadn't been able to keep the promises to the others. He wanted to see Yaren one last time. And he wished Malice had warned him. He should be at peace, but he was still bitter. He couldn't help but think this had been a trap. So then we go to Mercy. And she has gone to the library where all the books are kept. And there is a woman named Akura Constance who's like in charge of things. And she looks up to Mercy in such a way due to being uncrowned and being Malice's favorite and everything that she basically like escorts her around and gets her absolutely everything she needs. Mercy only suspected something was wrong when she left the scripts around the library and couldn't contact Dross. So she begins looking for Lindon. Obviously, considering that they're about to like deal with another fucking Dreadgod attack, the fact that there is a sage who is straight up missing is something that's like a legitimate concern, even objectively setting aside her friendship with him. So then we have Charity. And she has Lindon tossed over her shoulder like a sack of flour. And she is pissed. She is disgusted. And so basically she goes up into this tower that has no windows where Malice is observing everything. She's even apparently watching like a telenovela, which I love. And Charity says, "What is it?" And she's wanting to know all of it. What the fuck? How could you have not told me? Like, how could you continue to stay down here? Malice says, you could have left him. I was always going to save him before he died. Again, she definitely, so this is on purpose for sure, but like exactly what? First, we let him soak long enough for the lesson to sink in. The lesson what? To not like assume people know, I guess? But you could have told him. So the lesson you're teaching him feels like something that isn't really a lesson at all. It's like it just feels cruel, like for the point of it, which I guess that's her entire name, but her treating it like it's a lesson, it just doesn't feel like he needed a lesson so much as he just needed information. And she failed to give it to him with a very like distinct agenda. So the first thing Charity wants to know is what the link is and did her father know? To which Malice is like, of course he knew. And she says, I see you're upset, but there's nothing to be done about it. Advancement is the process of pushing against the natural order. The existence of the monarchs upsets a sort of balance, and the dreadgods are the consequence of that. So all you have to do is leave. You know what would happen if I advanced, Charity. The others wouldn't, and then the family would be vulnerable. If we all did, the dreadgods wouldn't just vanish, they'd fade over the course of decades or centuries, during which time they'd wreak havoc. And then the very next sage or herald to advance would rule the entire world with an iron fist. I am so tired of people in power. Their entire argument is basically, there are worse people out there, though. And like, are there? Maybe. But you don't really seem that great. And if you share the information that the dreadgods are created by ascending, maybe there will be a change to the way folks look at ascending on a global level, and it will be prevented or handled in some way. There's possibilities is all I'm saying. But by denying the information, you are forcing everybody into a position because of their ignorance, which is unconscionable. That's where I come down on anything that relies on people not being informed. And this is like the issue nowadays. There has been a lot of pushback against teaching kids like actual American history, like, you know, with the atrocities, and reading certain books that contain issues like questioning gender roles, anything like that. If you push back against the concept of educating people on truth and ideas that are counter to yours, you are not standing against that information. You are standing against people thinking for themselves and drawing their own conclusions and using reason and logic. And you're proud of that for some reason. And what Malice is trying to say is, well, you know what would happen. We don't know that, though, Malice, because this is what everybody knows of the world as of right now. What you're saying is a complete hypothetical that you invented to support your own position, and by no means necessarily exactly how it would go. Like, if we've got folks in place who are aware and able to sort of, for example, if all the monarchs ascended, but Lindon and his team were at Archlord, they would be a strong enough and more dangerous force that could potentially keep others from ascending or handle them as a group if they did not ascend, if they advanced to monarch. What I'm saying is, I have said this already, I've made this comparison already, but Lindon is in the same position that Athen is, where there is this big, ugly, ungainly system that clearly fucking does not work. And everybody is just like, it would be too hard to change it. It would be really hard. It would be so uncomfortable, and like it might be bad. It might be worse if we like changed it. So like we're just not gonna, cause ew. And on my reread, the conversation that Athen has with Rhaegon Shen when Rhaegon Shen is going to buy him out of the tournament. First of all, it's basically said there that the dreadgods are caused by the monarchs in so many words that rereading it, I was like amazed that I wasn't getting it. But why would I, you know? And he thinks about, because Rhaegon Shen says something about having a plan that could buy them more time. And Athen's response is, there it was, buy more time. It was never about solutions. It was never about making sacrifices. It was always an acceptable risk or price for millions of people to die so that things could stay as they were for a little bit longer. And that's the case with the Dreadgods, and it seems to be the case with the Abaddon as well. And I was like hit today by how much the word Abaddon sounds like abandon. I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know if that's on purpose, but then just sort of like struck me in a certain way. Emic Shard says, it reminds me of Marcone in Dresden Files, justifying his crime empire because, quote, it's more organized and I'm not the worst person who could be in charge. It's an interesting comparison because, like, to a degree, like, crime is always going to exist. So Marcone, it's like, I feel like he's just trying to make the best out of human nature and their, like, shitty tendencies. But also the whole way that, like, all of them have just agreed with one another to have each other's backs and cover it up because they don't want to. I don't know enough about how the Abaddon work. It's always going to come back to that for me. They are all behaving as if they ascend, they're going to be made servants somehow, be forced to behave in a way that they are not interested in, and that they won't have a choice in it, that it's like, you know, essentially them being enslaved. And I'm taking their word on that, but I shouldn't. Like, there's no real reason to accept that's what they say. Northstrider seems like the most honest in terms of his, like, motivations most of the time. He isn't somebody who bothers to sugarcoat. I don't feel like he's a liar, but I don't know that he actually knows. It may be just a suspicion or story that he has heard from somebody else who has ascended. I don't know what kind of contact they're in once they're a monarch with, like, people who have decided to go on. So he may be operating from just his, like, assumption of what would happen that's not really founded in anything. That said, even if they were going to be enslaved, I really I hesitate to have any sympathy because, like, everybody who is on this planet is low-key in that position already, and you're putting them in that position. Like, as we see from book to book, the weak are at they are at the mercy of the strong in a way that is so bonkers out of proportion that it's really just difficult for me to fucking care. Oh, Malice and Northstrider are going to be forced to work for the Abaddon. Like, jerk off motion. Fucking deal, guys. I truly can't give a fuck. Also, there's the aspect of the Abaddon themselves and the way that Ethan is responding to them and how angry he is about the way that they have been operating, combined with, on the reread, seeing some of the arguments and attitudes from the Vroshir, I'm starting to kind of be like, maybe the Abaddon suck. Like, really. I know in general that people haven't had a lot of respect for the Abaddon because of the fact that they are not jumping in to help when they can. And folks are sort of like, well, if you're up there doing shit, why don't you, like, step in? And that's true here. And it was also true in Elder Empire. But the Abaddon are more and more just beginning to look like celestial cops. And as I'm beginning to, like, understand things more, because the reread, once you know more about the Abaddon, certain things are a lot clearer and easier to understand. The context of some of it, the Mad King, for example, getting thrown in prison because he has, like, locked a fiend inside him, and they just assume, oh, well, it's going to fuck you up eventually. So they lock him up for, like, centuries. And then he does bust out and go mad and call them tyrants and rebel sort of feels like y'all did that to yourself, maybe. And like, I'm not entirely mad at the Mad King, because the Vroshir's position is the people are what's important. The iterations don't fucking matter. We get the people out, and then we destroy the iteration, which is not the actual important part. And I'm starting to kind of be like, maybe they're onto something actually. Like, not entirely one team or another, but if you're gonna approach it as the people are what matter, I'm never really going to disagree with that fundamentally. You know, it feels like you've got your eye on the right thing. So anyway, I'm just, what I'm saying is, and I'm not saying that like Suriel is motivated by the wrong things. I think she is one of the few that's motivated by the right things, which is why it's just her and Osriel commiserating, because everybody else is so like locked into their role in this system and their routine that they've lost sight of what they're supposed to actually be protecting. Their biggest concern is like the preservation of the iterations and the way in those iterations. Well, you let the iterations kind of grow out of control. You let them take over your garden because you had Osriel to just reap whenever you needed him to. And you had never had a tool like that before. But again, you let that happen. You refused to hear him when he said he didn't want to keep doing this, and grew and grew and grew. And your tool that you were using was getting more and more worn out, and you just fucking decided to ignore that. Meanwhile, you're like throwing people in prisons for reasons that are hypotheticals, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and now he's like a big bad, and you're all like, oh, see, we said this would happen. You fucking made this happen, though. Like, anyway, I am so off the fucking track. Let's get back to this. So, there's a moment here where, like, Malice comforts Charity, and Charity allows it, and I was like, Charity, no, don't do this. I wanted her to shove her away and, like, get up so bad. She doesn't. Malice saves Lindon, says, be whole, and, Charity has to say the oath that she won't tell before she leaves. And she goes to her own rooms and sits there and kind of has a panic attack because her whole world has been rocked. And I think a lot of us had this moment in our lives, probably a lot recently. There has been a lot of revealing of the realities underneath things that we sort of took for granted were a certain way, especially those of us with peak privilege. If you are straight and white, or at least white presenting and cis, you probably had a lot of moments of going, oh my God. And I know for me, I read the new Jim Crow, and I remember getting about 5 chapters in, and I put the book down and just burst into tears because my whole self felt like it was like breaking. I just didn't get it. And when I'm somebody who responds really well to statistics and long-term studies and the assertion that patterns repeat. I tend to believe that. So what's interesting is that when you have somebody who is a conspiracy theorist of the type that's like into Pizzagate and COVID isn't real, or that the vaccine is like made to do God knows what, those are people who are sort of asserting a conspiracy theory that flies in the face of the historical patterns of the way the country has worked versus patterns that are very much in line with the way we have worked. America is a country founded on slavery and exploitation. Like the United States was built on slavery and exploitation. So the assumption that we have just continued in that vein and camouflaged it this whole time makes all the sense. Of course, we haven't changed that much. We've just given it new coats of paint every few years and pretended it's not that. But when people who subscribe to other, what I think are outlandish conspiracy theories, they are asserting a thing is going on that is in direct opposition to what the actual power structures have been shown to be historically. And that's where it starts to lose me. I'm like, well, how can that be if XYZ? And it begins to fall apart. So all of this to say, Charity being like, I was operating this entire time thinking that I was helping to make the world better because the world is a fucking trash heap, yes, but there are things we can do to mitigate it. And instead, I've been played like a fucking fool and was wandering around with this air of superiority and an ambition to get better, born of the misapprehension that I'm on the right side. And now to find out that not only did I not know what was actually happening, but my father, who was so close to me, knew the whole time. And yeah, he couldn't tell me, but I don't feel like less of an asshole just because he couldn't tell me. And it, like, I'm sure it makes her feel slightly better that he ascended. Like, she knows, of course he fucking wouldn't stay here. Like, yeah, we all said that. Once we found out the way that this works, we were like, well, yeah, now it makes sense that Fury moved on because he would never fucking be part of this. But I just really feel for her in the whole sense of we all think a thing. And sure, the alternative is not perfect. But the fact that you won't even let anyone know the truth at all is really the part that's like fucking with her more, I think. You know? Yeah, there's never easy solutions to anything. But, you know, it's like one of my friends who was arguing with me about like universal healthcare and stuff. And she was trying to say that we don't have the money for it. And I had to pull up all of this information about how GE and Amazon and all of these other companies paid like zero income tax for the past like 6 years because it has been made so that they can do that. Meanwhile, I'm paying 25% as an independent business owner, I would like to say. I pay currently $1,000 a month towards income tax. So just saying. But she had no idea that these massive corporations are just fucking paying nothing. And if we just taxed them, we could fucking keep people from dying of diabetes because they had to cut insulin because they couldn't afford it, which is a very common story. If you look it up, there's like so many people who have died because they are either not taking their insulin the way they should, or they had to cut back to like a shittier brand to be able to afford it. And it didn't do what they needed because they needed a particular type. The stories like this are endless. All this to say, Charity is shook and she really, really, really wants to tell Mercy. And I was so happy to find out that she wanted to tell her because I was sort of worried that Charity was going to be so shaken by this information that she wasn't going to want to say anything because she didn't know what it would make Mercy want to do. Kind of like throwing gasoline on a fire. She already knows Mercy is sort of feeling a bit of a way and about to do something a little rebellious. And I thought maybe Charity was about to be like, I'm not going to add fuel to this. I'm going to wait and like find out more information or something. No, she wants to tell her right away. She said the oath, so she can't. But it was just reassuring to know that she would have if she could, because I really don't feel like I know Charity that well. And I wasn't sure. So yeah, when she like finally meets up with Mercy and explains, she has to be really cagey about it and be like, he broke an oath and his life isn't in danger, but it may threaten his future advancement. And she says, which may be a good thing. And I was like, yeah, come on, girl. Stop it, though. You know that's not true. And when Mercy says, did he betray the clan? Charity says, you might say that. That was as specific as she could get without leaving any information that could point toward the truth. Even revealing so much made invisible hands tighten around Charity's throat. Was he trying to hurt me? Charity considered lying, but Mercy wouldn't believe her anyway. Not only that, but Charity herself was less than pleased with Malice at the moment. She was not inclined to go further to protect the monarch's secrets than necessary. And I was just like, I can't believe you even considered telling her, yes, Lindon was trying to hurt you. Like, Charity. You know, this is what I mean when I say don't know her very well. The fact that she even considered it, that it entered her head at all, I was sort of like, what the fuck? Why would you do that? So finally, she says he's been brought to like the house that we gave him when he was training with us. He is going to be real fucked up when he wakes up. I really don't want you to be like nearby because he may be violent and it's going to be unpredictable for a little while, but keep an eye out and you'll be able to see him eventually. It's just right now, not a good time. And she says something about how like, he, you know, I've seen like some real blowback from this kind of spiritual injury before. And as she's talking about how intense this could be, we cut to Lindon, who basically wakes up and is like, whew, that was fucked. And Dross being like, well, I guess we didn't die. And I feel almost a little disappointed about that, but we're all right. And Lindon's just kind of like hops out of bed and does some stretches and it's like, all right, I'm going to go downstairs and run some laps. He is like, he is more fine than me on my best day. I knew as she was describing how bad it was going to be. I was like, yeah, it's not though. Charity just keeps thinking she understands what Lindon's limitations are and she doesn't get it. She just doesn't really get it. So he also like thinks mentally about telling Mercy the secret, and he realizes the oath is still in play, and he's just like, God damn it, I was really hoping she'd have just gotten rid of it. So then we go to chapter 12, and we have this black dragon who is out here cutting it up. And it turns out he is not the only one. Guys, I was not prepared for there to be a fucking room full of actual dragons. And look, I know that we have had the gold dragons, but they felt so much like they wanted to be human. They were just so much less dragony that these dragony ass dragons are quite a shock. And I mean, obviously it's been like hundreds of years. So it's been a minute since anybody has seen these guys, and it's going to be a shock, I have to assume, if they all just like fly out the window and just go and land in Black Flame Empire. Like, what's up? We're back. It's going to be a fucking disaster. Or it'll be great and they can like fucking fight dreadgods, but I am going to assume the Archlord is really the only one that's viable for that. All this said, he is not getting along with Ziel right out of the gate. The two of them are fighting like crazy, and Orthos is watching it, trying to get them both to settle down and like recognize that this isn't what it looks like. And finally, he says, this is foolish. Your fight ended years ago. And the dragon stops and says, "How many? I was imprisoned in year 780 of the obsidian calendar." "Yes," Orthos rumbled. "Well, I have never heard of that calendar." And he asks who rules the Black Flame Empire. And Orthos just like gives a name and a path. And he's like, "A blue dragon?" And Orthos is like, "Ooh, I'm not going to do that right now. I really don't want to be the one to tell him that it's a person. So we're just going to set that aside." And he just tells him the Black Flame Empire is not the one you left. It's another of the same name, reformed after yours fell. And this dude keeps trying to contextualize their presence here with the conflict he was involved in. And it's just obviously there's no relationship really, except for the fact that their paths align with the remnants that they assumed would be here. So Orthos tells him the Rune Queen is dead. And finally, this dragon is like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I believe you, but then why are you here?" And Orthos says, he's very careful, "I have come to free my ancestors from their eternal torment." And the dragon looks at him and says, "You've done us proud, turtle. When you advance, we will allow you to take on the form of a dragon." And I was kind of feeling like pleasantly surprised at the fact that this dude is like, "You've done us proud," because I sort of expected him to be like, "Ancestors, you're a fucking turtle." Doubt it. I thought he was going to be really like dismissive and shitty about it. And instead he just like looks at him and is going, "Yeah, I see it." But Orthos is like, "I mean, I have taken the form of a dragon. I'm not going to say that, but I definitely have. And I just like, I'm fine with it. So we're just not going to address that either." Orthos is tap dancing like a crazy person. So he says that his name is Helithshan, blood of the Midnight Fang. "I accept you into my service. When we free the prince's remnant, you will be rewarded for your assistance." Oh, I don't love it. As soon as he's like, "Y'all are my servants," I'm already, And then when we free the remnant, I'm like, oh, the whole point was for Orthos to take that. And this man is not going to allow Orthos to take it. Like, clearly. I mean, I don't, no, I don't see it. So Ziel agrees to help open the door with the remnant in it. But Helithshan is mad shady, and he stops at this door and says, "This one." Ziel says, "This is the one with the herald's remnant," and he doesn't answer. He just says, "Open it." I didn't notice on the first read through that he just doesn't answer. And I was not suspecting anything because I'm a dodo bird. Ziel is not an idiot like me, and he already smells a rat, but it's too late because Orthos is basically like, "Just do it, dude. We're going to have to do it anyway. Just do it." So he does it, but he kind of takes his time about it, like he's fucking with Helithshan a little bit. And when the door opens, dozens of red circles shining within the darkness. Dragon eyes. Black dragons flew out of the room, one after another, until there were about 15 of them. That is more than I was expecting. I mean, I wasn't expecting any, I'll be honest. But if I had been, I'd think 3, 4. 15 is too many. It's just too many. I don't like it. I don't like any of these guys. Just flat out, they seem like real dicks. So Ziel has protected himself with like a bunch of scripts. And he is looking at Helithshan because like the other dragons, none of them are archlords. Helithshan is the only one of any consequence that Ziel would really have to worry about. And Ziel says to him, I know an ambush when I see one. Orthos were leaving. Orthos's head ached. How could he explain to Ziel that this wasn't an ambush? If the situations were reversed, Orthos would have assumed he was under attack as well, but dragons didn't use such underhanded tactics. The point was even harder to make when one of the younger dragons breathed dark fire on Ziel from behind. Orthos, sweetie, I get it. You don't want them to be the type that would use underhanded tactics. You, like Charity, had an idea of what your people were like. And you were raised to believe that, basically to control you. Let's call it what it is. But sweetie baby, this is an ambush. This is exactly what it looks like. There's no reason not to believe that. There is no reason at all not to believe that. Does Helithshan seem friendly to you? He said you did them proud and he would let you take the form of a turtle and enter his service. Does that sound like he sees you as peers that require respect of any kind? Does that seem like there's anything binding his goodwill in any way? Like, you just straight up are putting all of your chips on honor, and it's all from fairy tales that you grew up with as a kid. It's just, it's so hard to watch. His faith is so perfect that they would never. It just, the closest he can get to understanding is trying to see it from Ziel's perspective and thinking, well, if I were Ziel, I'd probably think the same thing. But even beyond that, he can't consider it might actually be what Ziel thinks, you know? I just hate this so much because I get it, you know? I get it. I do. But I want to slap and shake him. Orthos is not somebody who tends to be this dense about people's motivations. He sees through stuff a lot of the time. And for him to have this particular blind spot is really galling, especially considering Ziel's depending on him to a degree to be like the go-between, because they clearly are not going to fucking listen to Ziel. So yeah, Orthos tells the young dragon to apologize for like breathing fire. And the hatchling is like, he didn't get hurt. Why should I apologize? It's fine. And Orthos is like, well, manners must have changed. I didn't think you would treat people like that. And Ziel says, if one more gold attacks me, I'm going to hit back. Helithshan leaned closer to Orthos. I find your attitude disrespectful, turtle. Idly, the Archlord flicked his tail to strike Orthos in the shell. Nothing had hit Orthos that hard since the Wandering Titan. Can I tell you how mad I was? He just flicked him. Rude. Like, ew. And I love that Ziel smashes this dude and doesn't even remember doing it because it's low-key a instinct. It's like, it's just the reaction, you know? This moment, when Orthos stood up for him, Ziel appreciated it, even if he didn't think the gesture would do any good. The dragons were just being cruel for the sake of it, which had been Ziel's experience with most dragons he'd met. They wouldn't go too far, given that Ziel might be able to fight all of them at once. But seeing Orthos defend him made him almost nostalgic. He remembered being that man, the one who stood in front of others, a guardian. When he thought that, he almost thought the background noise grew louder. He strained his spiritual perception, trying to feel the subtle difference. He didn't feel it coming when Helithshan attacked Orthos. There was no way he could have. The attack used virtually no Madra, as the dragon hadn't enforced himself, and he had been right next to Orthos. When his tail flicked Orthos into the wall, Ziel heard an echoing crack of impact, and then another crash as Orthos hit the wall. The turtle wasn't gravely injured, only dazed. Ziel knew that. But, for a moment, something in his spirit thrummed along with the distant tone like a string that had been plucked in his soul. Maybe he had felt something in himself that was approaching a sage's authority. That deserves more consideration, Ziel thought, as he pulled his hammer away from the wall. The wall through which he'd just launched the dragon archlord. The sheer impact had blown back the other dragons, but Ziel didn't even remember delivering the blow. He didn't regret it, though. Okay, so Ziel is going to manifest the guardian icon, the shield icon. This is what I'm getting. I'm making it up, but I'm not. I'm just like, I'm using the evidence in front of me. I swear to God, the fact that he blasted this motherfucker through several walls and doesn't remember it? I mean, oof. That is some fucking baller shit. Big dick energy. Ugh. I love these moments, you guys. I love them. I love them so much. There's a moment where Yaren had some real big dick energy. What shall I call it when it's Yaren? Big tit energy? Big clit energy? I'm going to say big clit energy. But that moment in the second book where they're getting like surrounded by sand vipers and she just slaps a bitch with her sword. And then the girl starts to keep talking and Yaren slaps her again on the other side of her face. Oh, it's so good. I love Yaren so much. Okay. So he asks Orthos, how long will it take you to shrink? And poor Orthos is fucking out of it and is just like, what? And he says, too long. And he grabs him. And he throws him down the hall. Black fire streaked down on him, and he caught most of it on his shield. Then he forged scripts to launch him away. And Ziel is sort of thinking about how if Orthos weren't here, if he weren't required to look out for poor Orthos because he is not of a level, then Ziel could fully engage, and he thinks he might actually even be able to win. But with Orthos, it's just not, he can't do it. So they had to run. The problem was the dragons knew this place better than they did. So I really enjoy him directing Orthos and yelling that way. And Orthos just straight up like listens to his instructions and does not argue or ask any questions or anything. And fucking Helithshan catches up to them anyway. And these flames that he fills the hall with had been conjured with aura, real fire, augmented by destruction aura so it could threaten even Ziel. Fortunately, scripts were great at blocking the effects of aura. So he wards a circle to keep it away, and he's feeling like, okay, I'm managing this. I know it's just a distraction. And he is striking with his hammer. He angled his shield, catching a blow, releasing his stone anchor at the same time. The hit launched him through the hallway where he supplemented the speed of his flight with scripts, which I just really want to see all this. I just want to see it on the screen. I say that all the time, but I'm just going to say it. Ziel frantically gestured as he flew, but Orthos only figured out what he meant and ran to the side at the last second. The Archlord followed. As he was kindling another dragon's breath, Ziel found the right 2 runes. The script flickered green as Ziel's relatively weak Madra clashed with the Rune Queen's. Then his modification was accepted. He could change the script because of the similarity in their paths, and it was only a small change. the size of the circle expands. A bar of black and red madras stretched for 10 feet heading for Ziel, frozen in midair. Orthos huffed as he jogged up behind Ziel. Can you do that for all of them? I don't think it matters anymore. Oh no. Yeah. The castle, or at least this section of it, was falling apart. I hate this so much. Down there, Ziel shouted, but because an underlord was too much slower than an archlord, Orthos hadn't processed the sight when Ziel grabbed him and shoved him inside. Just before the ceiling collapsed, Ziel followed. I am really, really hoping none of these dragons are going to make it out. But I have to assume they will. I just feel like they must. I don't want them to. I really, really just don't want to deal with more dragons, guys. Every dragon we've met fucking sucks. They just really are not likable creatures, man. They just don't want to work with anybody. They're like middle schoolers. They're like, just fucking tiny little sociopaths who just don't give a shit about anybody else and really are kind of mystified at the idea of giving a shit about anybody else. It's just not it. I don't like them. So I'm going to assume that they're all able to withstand a hit from their own castle falling on them, and that there's probably something built in to protect them from this, but I'm hoping I'm wrong and that they just don't make it. Fingers crossed. So yeah, I'm going to wrap up. Let's see. Emhan says, even with his Madra channels twisted and destroyed, Ziel couldn't stop himself from defending Lindon and Ghostwater. Best boy. It's true. Ziel, having just started, or actually I guess I'm 2/3 of the way through now, Bloodline. He almost starts to run at one point because his fucking trauma, man. He gets PTSD from this attack and he wants to bail. But he can't leave everybody. He can't do it. It's just consistently appealing to his desire to care for those who are weaker than him. Always seems to work. It takes a couple tries sometimes, but what he seems to be the most traumatized by is how helpless he was to protect people he cared about back when this all happened to him. It's not even when he thinks about where it all went wrong. It's really rare for him to think of it in terms of, oh, back when I got my spirit destroyed. It's always back when I fucked up and everybody died because I was a moron. It's always about what happened to everybody else. So I'm going to assume that his underlord revelation was something to do with that, and it's really interesting that Lindon's whole thing is the void sage and emptiness and yada, yada, yada. And his underlord revelation was, I pursue the sacred arts because I don't want to be worthless anymore, which is emptiness as well. And the concept of that is so linked that I don't know. It's just kind of interesting the way that you can see the lines that connect things, And McShard says, dragons are like middle schoolers is not the statement I expected, but I'll absolutely take it. They just seem so petty. They really do seem childish to me. There's just a fucking attitude with them that's I think especially with the gold dragons and the fact that they simultaneously see themselves as so superior to human beings, but then they want to mimic the appearance of humans, which feels so weirdly conflicted and insecure that I'm just man, go to therapy. Stop it. You're making a mess for everybody. Just go deal with your own shit. Oh, right. Sush says, shout out to that singular black dragon in Wintersteel who was just a great guy. He adopted several human children and frequently spoke out against the rule of the golden dragons. But apparently he survives. So maybe we'll see him again. I don't know. So All right, I'm going to wrap up, but thank you guys again for hanging out with me. I swear to God, this series is going to kill me. Next episode is going to be covering chapters 13 and 14. Yay, 2 more. All right, everybody. I will see you on Thursday, and until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.